Welcome to the From Burnout to Recovery show with your host, Dr. Kate. This is where your journey to burnout recovery starts. Are you feeling overwhelmed or like work has become unmanageable? Join me and my guests for open and honest conversations about burnout recovery from the comfort of the front porch. I am here to help you build your resilience and prepare you for burnout in a whole new way through a variety of perspectives. Move past the idea that burnout can only be addressed by avoidance and work to integrate recovery into your daily life. Relax, take a breath. The From Burnout to Recovery show starts now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the From Burnout to Recovery show with Dr. Kate on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Kate. And I am excited that you are joining us for the show today. Remember, as you are enjoying the show, if you haven't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star rating and a review to what is your favorite part. And while you're at it, be sure to share this with a friend who may need to hear it as well. Today, we are going to be joined by our guest, Brooke Rozzi. Brooke is a functional nutritionist specializing in women's health. She is a mom of 2 and has been in the health and fitness industry for 14 years. After becoming a mom and through personal experiences with stress that the impacts it left on her body, she realized how unsupported women are in knowing what their body needs in order to feel good and how to achieve it to avoid burnout. Today's model is set up with a cylindrical, I can say words, it's fine, dear audience members, diet and exercise pattern, but it isn't set to serve what a woman's body truly needs to survive. She works within her coaching to change the narrative on how women approach their health and fitness so they can truly feel good in their skin, ditch the diet and exercise mentality, and live a life that they are feeling really good in. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am really excited to have you. And I think that aspect of kind of the cycle of the kind of diet and exercise that we get into is so important to talk about in that piece. I know I have definitely found myself in that space and have found ways to get out of that. So I'm sure our audience members would love to hear more about that at some point in our conversation. But to get us started, if you would tell us a little bit more about yourself, your own experience with burnout and your journey to recovery.
Yeah. So I'm a functional nutritionist. I've been doing this for over 14 years, and I now want to practice with other coaches who, one of my biggest drivers within our practice is getting women who help women who have been in their shoes. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the coaches who work with me who have been in that way in some way, shape, or form in their life through various experiences and now want to, have gone back to school for the education to help women through it as well. And I've been in the industry for over 14 years, but I didn't start this way. I started as a personal trainer in my young 20s, and in that stage in my life, I think all I really cared about was looking good in a bikini. And it was a lot of that, diet approach, and nutrition was something that made me fat or skinny. And it wasn't a conversation around health and how I was feeling, because when you're at that age too, I think you have a long time to feel good. Right. Yeah. And I didn't know and appreciate how amazing a woman's body is and what my body could do. And I didn't really understand the things that I had been doing for years to come leading up to that, and how it was influencing where I was at then, until probably about midway through my career, my dad passed away. And it was a pretty traumatic short period of time. And my body just felt like it went haywire. I had gained 20 pounds in about 4 months, unexplainably. It's not like I started eating a pizza every night type of a thing. And I wasn't getting any answers. I was going to several physicians. No one was really, from the lab tests, no one was really getting any answers to anything that was happening. And everyone was just like, well, maybe you could try going gluten-free. And I was like, well, that's not solving it, right? That's not fixing what's happening here. Yeah. And I really started to look more. I've always been the rebellious child asking why. And I really started to ask well, why is this happening? Right? Why is my body just kind of freaking out all of a sudden? Do I feel like my body is working against me? Through the process of working through those things, led me to go back to school. And after going back to school, I was seeing so much, and in hindsight, looking back on the years that I was just kind of running my body into the ground. And diet after diet, ignoring signs and symptoms that I was experiencing, just kind of pushing through stuff. That traumatic time in my life was kind of like a straw that had broken the camel's back type of a thing. But what really was causing the issue was all the years of things that were leading up to it. And my body had just reached a point where it couldn't do it anymore. And it just couldn't keep up. And it really forced me into a complete lifestyle change. But I really started to see a lot of those things that I was experiencing on small scales with a lot of clients, women that I was seeing. And most definitely after having my daughter, I said to my husband, I was like, I don't want our daughter to feel this way about her body. I don't want her to feel frustrated about her body. And I was frustrated through that process because there wasn't a lot of people who could really educate me on my body as a woman and what was going on and how my body was made to feel and function. Yeah. So that's really what kind of led me to what we do now and how we work with people now.
What were some of the things when at that point where you started to have kind of the body breakdown and those kind of things, what were some of the things that you first initially started to do for yourself?
Yeah. One of the biggest things, I skipped sleep. I would wake up early to go to get my 5 a.m. workout in and crush my body. And I was always tracking my food. I was always making sure I was in a certain range. I was hyper strict sometimes with things. I really just wasn't giving myself a break. Yeah. And the biggest thing that I had to learn was actually for me to move forward with progress, I needed to take a step back. And I was very much the head down and nose forward type of a person. And it was actually probably the hardest thing for me to do was to swap out some of those hard workouts for like yoga or walking and to maybe skip a workout to sleep in a little bit and give my body what it needed. And to actually do less. I started to skip tracking my food. I deleted all the tracking apps from my phone, and I really had to get back in touch with how my body was feeling. Cause somewhere along the way in there, I lost that. I lost the ability to even tune into what does hunger and satiation even feel like in my body? How am I really feeling today? And I really had to start tuning back into that aspect. And it was a lot of mindful practices that I feel like made the biggest difference, with assistance of a lot of things. But I think initially my mindset was, well, like, what supplement should I take? Right. And like, what do I need to do? Right. What's the thing I need to do next? And the answer was really like to stop viewing stuff that way and to start to like actually just like slowing down for a little bit.
I think you probably bring up something that I know I've struggled with. I'm sure a number of our listeners are challenged with, and that is the idea of doing less to feel better in that aspect. So what were some of the first few ways that you helped yourself to slow down?
Yeah. I actually started incorporating breath work in that time. I always kind of made fun of it at that time because I was like, that's just too woo-woo for me, right? Like I can't do that. And I actually really loved it. It allowed me to just slow down and be there. And I actually had to mentally talk myself through the first couple of sessions that I did because I did not love it when I first did it. I journaled a lot, and I had tried journaling in the past, and I really felt like I never had anything to write down. So I actually kind of challenged myself to just set a timer and just write whatever just came out, just write it. And I was actually starting to get surprised at what was coming out. So I just started journaling out a lot, started slowing down, doing the breath work. And then the biggest thing from a movement standpoint and my exercise was I actually scaled back a lot of the intense workouts that I was doing and started to, it's not that I didn't work out, but I swapped them out for like yogas and things that were really making me to breathe and move and just be more in tune with my body.
Yeah. I like the idea of the kind of the swapping out pieces. So taking from like the very intense workout to what does yoga feel like? I also really like that you brought up the journaling and specifically like the free writing and how it's kind of like, oh, that's surprising that came up in those kinds of pieces. What are some of the things that you still do in your day to day that help you kind of, ward off, future burnout?
Yeah. The prime example. So I'm talking to you from my bed today because I had a really busy couple of days the last 2 days. And so today I knew I was like, I'm going to need to like chill in between times that I have things scheduled. I'm not putting anything on my docket. I told my team, I was like, I'm not available outside of our meeting today. I'm just putting a boundary up. So the biggest things that I do now is I just kind of set a little bit of a boundary when I know I need it, when I can feel myself getting to that, like mental exhaustion is usually my first sign before I get to physical exhaustion. I can feel myself like just not totally mentally with it. It's taking me a second to get through stuff. That's usually my first sign that I need to step back a little bit. And I knew I was going to have a busy couple of days. So I strategically knew that today was going to be more of a rest day. So in my days in general, what I will usually do is I'll look at my schedule and say like, all right, there's a busy couple hours there. That next 30 minutes or 60 minutes, I'm going to block something off there. And I'm either going to, and I'm just going to check in with myself for a second and see what sounds good energetically. I'm either going to go take a walk. I'm going to go drink some water. I'm going to lay down and do nothing. I might just like, I might feel like doing something at the house and just feel like cleaning something. I just kind of check in with how I'm feeling. And I do tune into my cycle, my hormonal cycle. And I'm very aware that I know like that 10-day period leading up to my menstrual cycle coming, that I am generally a little bit more exhausted. I usually need a little bit more rest. So I do strategically in my schedule structure in more rest. So I will limit how much is scheduled around those times of the month for me, and make sure that the things that are scheduled are a little less mentally taxing for me too.
You brought up something that I think is so important, and that's like the scheduling of rest time and recovery time and those pieces. And that's absolutely something that I, work with folks on in that aspect. But you brought in another piece to it that I think is really, really important. And that is understanding like our own, just kind of like body cycle and, our ebb and flow of whether it be our hormone cycle or other things happening. So not just looking at the calendar and thinking, okay, what's a busy time, but also like, where's my body function in all of this? So whether it be our monthly cycle or something else going on, recovering from being sick or something to that effect and factoring that in too. So I'm so glad that you brought that piece into this.
Yeah, I used to, and I've asked my clients this before, and I was pretty shocked at the results. I've asked like, how many of you take rest and feel guilt-free when you do it? And now probably 50% of our clients are moms too. And a lot of them could not say yes to that. And I said, how many of you take rest, but you're internally beating yourself up while you're doing it, right? Like you're torturing yourself. And a lot of them said yes, that's what they're doing. And I used to do that. What really helped me was being aware of my own hormonal cycle, because I used to have this expectation on myself that I needed to feel the same every day. And that's actually not realistic as a woman. Right.
It's, as a human, no,
even, no one is going to feel the same every day, but I used to like expect that of myself. And when I became way more aware of how my hormones flowed through the month, I was like, I'm actually not meant to feel the same every single day. And that's not a bad thing. I have times of the month where I am going to be more mentally attuned and focused. And I have times of the month where I'm going to be more creative and meant to rest a little bit more. And when I was able to tune into that, it gave me almost the grace to like for myself to take that rest when I needed it. But I also started to recognize the more that I was doing that, I look back on now the days that I used to have busy days, like I did the last couple. And I remember like my last couple of clients or people that I would be working with, I would ask them the same question like 3 times because I would be so out of it. And yesterday I could feel that starting to happen. And I said to my husband, I was like, God, do you remember that? Like I used to do this all the time. And I was like, I could never do this again. And I was like, it's so crazy to go back to how you used to do things to now recognizing like, wow, instead of reacting to when I'm exhausted, now I'm kind of preventatively putting that structure in there so that I'm not getting to that place again.
Yeah. What are some other indicators that you find for yourself that are good, kind of like just almost like those flags or those warning signs of like, oh, hey, I'm starting to get into this mental fatigue place. I'm starting to get into this physical fatigue place. It's time to schedule some rest.
Yeah. So I have 2 kids. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So they can be a lot more, mentally taxing, I guess. So I do give myself a little bit more of understanding that in this stage of my life, I probably need more. So I will notice that my ability to just like tune in to what the kids need and just like, take myself out of their emotions will start to become less. And I will start to kind of get like heightened or wrapped up in like whatever their reaction is. I can sense that in myself. I'll start to get triggered by things more. It could even be like social media, like scrolling things, and I'll see that and I'll start to feel that trigger a little bit. I will start to almost react a little bit. Like I have to, like, maybe I don't respond to my husband the best way, maybe something in there is when I'm starting to sense like, all right, I'm pushing it a little too much and I need to take it back a little. And sometimes I will sense like, even if it's not even in like what I'm doing so much is like, maybe I'm spending too much time on my phone because I'm scrolling too much, or maybe there's been too much stimulation from like the TV or electronics or something. I'll start to notice that. And that's when I usually can tell that I need to make that shift more. And then before it gets to the like, all right, I feel like I'm fumbling my words and I can't have a clear conversation. Then I'm in that. I'm too far into it.
Yeah. You brought up the guilt piece a little bit. And so I think a lot of people, and I'm sure listeners are like, yeah, totally resonate with that fact of like, I know I need to rest, but I know I'll feel guilty about it. So I don't, or I try to rest. And then, my mind gets judgy and I end up doing stuff. So what are some of the things that you have done for yourself to kind of, to combat that kind of guilty conscious when it comes to resting?
The biggest thing I've noticed, I run a business with clients. I show up much more present and available to my client. And not just my clients, my kids, my husband, everybody around me, when I am more rested and fulfilled and I'm able to be there. I have noticed I'm no good for anyone when I'm halfway listening and I'm having to like push myself internally to stay focused when I'm having a conversation. That was the biggest red flag for me, was knowing that. But the other thing was, knowing my hormones, knowing where I needed to be actually really supported me understanding when I needed to take the rest. And I think for me, once I think when you have like a big physical reaction to something like I did, I think that really forced me into the like, no, I never want to feel this way again type of a thing. So for me, it was more of a like not optional anymore because I did not want to feel the way that I had felt before. And I was not willing to let my body go back to that place again.
I think that is so incredibly important. I'm curious for maybe some of our listeners and who might be kind of, listening to this. It's like, okay, so I understand that rest is important. I understand that, and they're like, Dr. Kate talks about this all the time. We need rest in order to be more productive and those kinds of pieces. But they're maybe in a place of like, I don't know what rest looks like. What are some of the things that you do for yourself that are rest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I hear that with clients too. I'm like, all right, I call it like restoration or recovery time. And they're like, well, what is that? Right? Like, I can't just go get a massage or spa pampering all the time. And I'm like, no, like that's amazing. Right. But none of us are doing that every week. For me, I love taking an Epsom salt bath. So at least like once a week, I'll do that because the magnesiums are very calming. The heat is relaxing. Getting out into the cool home is good for the parasympathetic system. So I love that personally. I kind of come up with a list for my clients and I'm like, you choose what works for you. And sometimes I don't want to take a bath. Sometimes I'll do one of the other ones. So Epsom salt baths are phenomenal. I love breath work, somatic breath work. You can do breath work in any way. You could just sit here and, and breathe 4 seconds in, hold it for 4, let it go for 4 and repeat. Right. So it can be done very simply and it can be done while you're driving at any time. Meditation is a good one. It's not one I've ever personally loved, but I do have clients who love it. And I also think it's a really good one when you are someone who's just trying to incorporate it without feeling like you have a second job, right? Like you can do it for 5 minutes before bed at night. You can do it when you wake up in the morning. There's a lot of ways you can incorporate small little things like that. Journaling, I actually think is good. A lot of us don't think of it as rest, but it's a little bit more mental restoration. It's kind of tapping into that creative space a little bit. Walking, I love. The biggest thing I say is put the electronics away, just go walk and be outside. Enjoy that. Yoga can be phenomenal. And the biggest thing with yoga, I say, is tune into what type of yoga you need, because there could be some yogas that can be really intense, and that may not be the right version for you. So you might need different versions in different times. And honestly, sometimes just boredom, as hard as it can be, just lay down and just be bored and have silence. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it's usually a sign you probably need it more. You usually need to lay in the boredom more.
I'm sure some of our listeners are like, oh, I really don't want to hear that, but I know I needed to. So that piece of like, oh, if boredom is really uncomfortable, it's probably exactly what we need in that moment, is to just to sit and be bored and be with ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. There have been so many great insights so far today. What is one additional piece of advice that you would offer our audience members?
I think the biggest thing is to understand that what you need may not be what the next person needs, right? And that's 100% okay. I think we very often get caught up in comparison, or, well, that's what worked for her, but I didn't like that, so maybe there's something wrong with me. There's nothing. And you're going to find different parts at different, stages of your journey that you enjoy. There's things that I enjoyed 5 years ago that I just don't love right now. And it's constantly, being in that journey of asking yourself, like, what feels good to me now, and tuning into that, and just being aware that it's your body, your journey. What you need is not going to be the same as the next person.
Yeah, that is so important. And one of the reasons why I like to bring so many different perspectives onto this show, such as yourself, Brooke, to kind of highlight that for our listeners, so that, maybe what you're doing isn't for everyone, but the next person might hear something that is like, okay, that fits. So thank you for, bringing up that perspective again, and that there's lots of different ways to do rest and recovery. And I think the important thing is finding the ways and the things that work well for you, and making sure that you are scheduling and incorporating that into your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can our audience members find you if they'd like to connect with you more?
Yeah. Probably on Instagram way more than I should be. So my Instagram is Brooke Rozzi. It's a great place. You can come, just shoot me a message and say that you found me on the podcast. I love to connect with people. So you can message me there. Or I have a little email for you. It's just the 3 things that you probably need to pay attention to, but don't, when it comes to your hormones. So I can send it out to you, and you can drop it for anyone who is interested in really knowing, like, all right, what's going on in my body, and why am I feeling this way? It's just a 20-minute video to kind of guide through, like, what's actually impacting hormonal function and how they could be making you feel.
That's awesome. What a great share and resource for everyone who is listening. So, and of course, dear listeners, we will have all of that information in the show notes for you. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I am so appreciative of our guest, Brooke Rozzi, for joining us on the show today and talking a little bit about her process in her burnout recovery. And I think the concept of finding some space and a way for you to provide some rest and recovery is so incredibly important. And it goes into our recovery moment a little bit today, because today we are going to be talking more about how we're going to do a guided visualization for self-compassion. So when we think about that guilt or those feelings and judgment that may come up when we are trying to implement rest and recovery, this is going to help you find and utilize some self-compassion so that you can let go of those feelings and lean into that rest and recovery with the knowledge that it is going to be probably one of the most impactful things to help you be more productive. So let's jump into that. Of course, as we go into the recovery moment, I want to remind you to do so in a safe space. So if you're driving, if you are walking, keep your eyes open, listen to the visualization, but maybe come back to it another time when you can be a little more comfortable in doing so. So let's get started. Once again, before we jump into our recovery moment, I'd love to remind you, dear listeners, to hit that subscribe button and be sure to share the show with someone else who may need to hear it. So let's get started with our visualization of self-compassion. And we are going to be thinking about this as a blanket of love. So take a moment to come into a comfortable seated position, turning your attention towards your breath, and making any adjustments that are required for you to be completely comfortable. On your next inhale, go ahead and close your eyes or lower your gaze when you feel ready. Now, gently notice any tension you might be holding in the jaw area. Kindly, without judgment, allow it to seep downwards into the earth. Notice any tension you might be holding in your neck or shoulders, and see if you can allow that tightness to melt slowly, running down your body and into the ground that can hold and transform it. Notice any other places within your body where you might be holding or bracing, and grant them permission, even if just for the next short while, to take a break. Release any tension that can be safely and comfortably released. Now, I'd like you to imagine a blanket. This blanket is made from the most beautiful, delightful material you can think of. For some, it might be silk. For others, it might be soft and warm like fleece. Alternatively, your blanket might be made of flowers, or it might be a knit of the softest natural wool. And then notice what color this blanket is, whether solid or multi-toned. Let it take on whatever color or colors you gravitate toward most, anything that soothes and comforts you. Now, I'd like you to imagine this blanket draping over you in the most gentle, loving way. As it touches your body, you realize that this blanket is infused with deep, unquestioning, unconditional love. And now that love is enveloping you. Feel the love that this blanket carries now, seeping into every cell, every muscle, every organ, and every thought within your body. No matter how you're feeling or what you're thinking, no matter what emotions you're feeling or what stories you're carrying today, this blanket embraces you. Like sunlight, the warmth penetrates every single part of you. Some areas of your body might naturally receive this love, while others might be resistant. If this is the case, focus on the places where the love enters naturally, and then see if it might gently and slowly expand to those other regions. See if you can take in what it feels like to be embraced by this, to bathe in love, kindness, and tenderness unconditionally. If your mind drifts into thoughts, come back to your sense of the blanket. When you feel you're ready to close this practice, take a moment to tune into your heart, maybe placing your palms there. Offer yourself gratitude for this practice, knowing that it is just that, a practice. Gently let your sense of this blanket dissolve if it hasn't already, knowing that it's available to you anytime, always. It's portable and doesn't take up space in your handbag or the trunk of your car. Whenever you need it, you can call it forth. Come back to your breath now, and then the sense of your seat beneath you. And when you're ready, you can slowly open your eyes. Thank you for practicing with me today. Dear listeners, for more recovery moments, you can find them by following me on Instagram at Dr. Kate Steiner, and be sure to subscribe to the From Burnout to Recovery show on YouTube. I'm so grateful to our guest, Brooke Rozzi, and I'm grateful to each of you for listening. Thank you for joining us today on the From Burnout to Recovery show with Dr. Kate on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Dr. Kate, and I wish you peace on your journey. Thank you for joining me on the front porch today. Remember that you can download your free guide on how to recover from burnout in 2 hours a week on my website, drkatesteiner.com. And as always, be well, my friends.